It is important that we do talk about our shared achievements today. And there are many in education, in jobs, the environment, healthcare, and so much more.
But shortly after that right there, it was time to talk about what actually needs fixing. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham delivered the State of the State to kick off the 60-day legislative session up at the Roundhouse. Of course, we have complete team coverage tonight on the first day of that session. Let's send it right out to Tessa Mintes and Griffin Rushton to kick things off for us. Good evening to both of you.
And good evening to everyone at home. And Governor Lujan Grisham made it as crystal clear as she could at the very beginning of her address. She said public safety and child well-being need our action now. And that seems to very well be where she expects lawmakers to get the most work done over these next 60 days, which should be pretty busy, Griffin.
It will be busy, but right now at 5, we're going to zero in on that child well-being mandate. But before we do that, let's quickly run through those other areas the governor covered in her hour-long State of the State address. Now, that does include education, childcare, CYFD, the economy, environmental concerns, housing and homelessness, as well as crime, and finally health care. But then she did double down on public safety right at the end.
Oh boy, and did she. Let's go ahead and get started with education right now, because we have consistently and unfortunately struggled in that important area. I think it's fair to say for generations here in New Mexico. But the governor managed to share some encouraging statistics, which she's using to make these new proposals.
Yeah, she did. She really celebrated some of the legislature's previous investments in education, including the $30 million they spent last year on a summer reading boot camp. You may remember that. Well, she revealed today that students that participated in that program saw an 11% increase in their reading scores. That is a huge deal, double digits right there. So that's understandably why she wants even more money for another reading boot camp, and she's wanting to add a math and STEM program along with that. But this year, the governor is zeroing in on universal free child care. She says 30,000 New Mexican kiddos already benefit from the state-funded program, and she's asking for another $205 million to make free child care available for every New Mexico family.
Let's become the first state in America to give every child the start they deserve with universal access to high-quality child care today and for the future. Set the standard for America, New Mexico.
Now, the governor is also committing to a 180-day school calendar initiative. She's asking for funding for that, but that initiative, it faced a lot of backlash this year, and it is likely going to face even more this year.
There was so much. Another interesting thing she touched on was incentivizing schools who are able to ban cell phone use during school hours, which we know that's a debate in APS schools right now as well. So some interesting proposals she's made today. We know that so much of the success, though, for education in our children's lives relies on how things are at home. And for our kids needing CYFD services, I mean, they face countless obstacles. So the governor spent a good amount of time in her State of the State address today laying out her expectations for the notoriously troubled department, but also made some substantial proposals. Let's go over those right now for you. They were pretty startling, starting with a significant pitch to help foster families or grandparents raising their grandchildren. We know there are so many of them in our state. She wants to exclude those families from having to pay personal income tax. That's huge. And she wants to increase their monthly stipends by up to $900 per child. But listen, she also wants more oversight at CYFD. That's something lawmakers have pushed for years. First, she is proposing an independent outside expert to evaluate the department's performance and then report those findings to not just her, but the legislature as well, every 6 months. She believes these more regular reviews will help them make real-time adjustments and see the real-time picture of what these families are facing. And what about the challenge of abused kids falling through the cracks? Well, the governor has a proposal to tackle that obstacle as well.
I'm also calling for a new independent child protection authority, jointly appointed by the legislature and the executive that will ensure CYFD adequately resolves all complaints from families and parents. Another indicator about what's happening or not happening.
So now to a section of CYFD 4 Investigates has really focused on in the past few months. That is the Cara program that is designed specifically for mothers who have faced substance abuse throughout their pregnancies, even beforehand and after their deliveries, and also the babies who were exposed to those substances. But 4 investigator Brittany Costello has exposed the overwhelming inadequacies in the Cara program. Brittany joins us now at the Roundhouse. So Brittany, it sounds like Cara is at least on the governor's radar based on what she said in her State of the State.
Oh, Tessa, it absolutely is. The governor spent some time focusing on Cara and the changes she wants lawmakers to make to the program this year, some of which advocates have been pushing for years now. So let's get into it. The governor wants to move the Cara program from CYFD to the Department of Health. As we've detailed in some of our reporting in the past, this program is extremely complicated, involving several state agencies. So what happens now is when a mother gives birth to a substance-exposed baby, the hospital is supposed to create a plan of care. It's supposed to be a safety net for those kids, but what we discovered is it's created massive gaps. Those agencies were back and forth with which one was supposed to be following up with the families and making sure they get the help they need. Many families fell off the radar. Ultimately, we found more than a dozen children have died with the plan of care since its implementation.
But the truth is, too many families do not adhere to the spirit of that program. That's why I believe it's time to make these interventions mandatory for these families.
Now, while advocates are excited about the attention, some legal experts tell us they're concerned about mandating those plans of care without the state taking legal custody of those children. But again, we're going to have to wait and see how those Cara-related bills are filed. Now, again, the original intent of the bill is to get these families the help they need. Without it, we've seen mothers arrested for the deaths of their babies. Just last year, a mother was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the overdose death of her baby. So again, we know there's this big connection between substance abuse and crime. Obviously, we've covered it extensively in our Missing Pieces series, so I want to bring in 4 investigator Ryan Laughlin. And while the governor hit on substance abuse and crime, there was something missing.
Never mentioned juvenile justice reform,
right,
which is really surprising because lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have indicated a willingness to crack open the children's code and really take a look at changes that might need to be made. And we're watching those proposals carefully. We sat down with lawmakers and policy analysts just yesterday, and there's wide concern about changes to this children's code, what it could mean for consequences down the road. Now, while auto theft and teenage homicide are trending up, especially in the metro, there's some surprisingly positive trends that we're going to reveal in the 4 Investigates coming up later this week. Now, the key question that needs to be answered is, should kids face adult consequences for more crimes, especially serious crimes? We're going to take some more time on that at 6 o'clock tonight, but a lot that 4 Investigates is following.
A lot to unpack, and like you just said, we'll have much more tonight at 6. Tessa and Griffin, back to you guys.
Our 4 Investigates team, thanks guys so much. And you know, many of the proposals that we've heard from the governor today that we've already gone over seem to echo remnants of what Republicans have proposed for years now, Griffin. So where are they standing on what they heard from the governor today?
I mean, you're absolutely right. These feel like the same bills, just now with a little bit of a different name on them. You know, Republicans, especially when it comes to CYFD, Republican lawmakers have been calling for this increased CYFD oversight for years now, especially for that outside independent agency. But they faced little support from Democrats in years past, and even less support from the governor's office, who, you know, just 2 years ago really made it seem like they wanted to take care of CYFD on their own, figure out the problems from within. So this announcement today really does feel like a 180 for these Senate Republican leaders who really say they just want to see the governor follow through on this.
We've had multiple bills out there that have never seen the light of day. I hope, and I'm going to say hope, that the governor is actually going to put effort behind her words.
Now, it is worth noting that House Republican leaders who we heard from a little bit before the session told us on some of these public safety and CYFD initiatives, they're not really concerned over, whether Democrats or Republicans are behind them. They're more focused on making sure that these initiatives actually cross the finish line.
Yeah, absolutely. And, typically when we are at the State of the State, there are some applause moments built in. And usually who's applauding falls along party lines based on what the governor has said. But there was one of the governor's statements which got a standing ovation from nearly the entire legislature and almost the entire gallery as well. That was about public safety, and that will be the focus of our Roundhouse to Your House coverage here on KOB4 at 6. Again, the governor circled back to the crime crisis as the final plea of her State of the State address. But why the pushback on at least a few of her proposals we've heard so far may not come from exactly who you would expect. We'll talk about that tonight at 6. Trevor?
All right, Tessa, Griffin, Ryan, Brittany, we'll see all of you again in just a few minutes. Thank you so much. Well, if you happen to miss any second of our legislative coverage, it's all good because there's always KOB.com. You can catch up anytime over the course of the next 2 months as lawmakers continue to make key decisions for our state.